Is it possible to shoot 3 completely different visualizers for 3 separate tracks all in one single day? This wasn't just 3 visualizers. It was one continuous narrative split across 3 different performances. The artist never physically appears, but instead, 3 men embody the emotion of her songs, each one of them tied to a different car, and each one of them representing a different chapter of the story. And we had one day to bring it all to life. So in this video, I'm going to be showing you exactly how we made it happen. From the concept to the vehicles, the rain, the grip and lighting strategy, and how we maintain visual continuity and the production lessons that came out of it. If you're new here, my name is Janyo and I am a DP/photographer based in New York, and I specialize in commercial and documentary work. So without wasting any more time, let's get right to it. So these visualizers were created for an artist called Scribbles Who, and essentially she focuses on emotionally driven style R&B type of music. Her music feels like the sort of conversations that you would have with yourself when no one else is around. Instead of placing her in the visualizers, the creative direction led by herself and the director of photography, who was called CEOJAY, one of my good friends, came up with a concept. And the idea was to physically remove her from the frame, which is something that they do occasionally when they work together on these sort of projects. So in her stead, we worked with 3 different men who were the muses for this project. And essentially, each one of them was going to be lip syncing the tracks. Each performance sort of carries its own emotional weight, and we wanted to highlight each one of those differently, which is why we wanted to go with 3 different looks and 3 different sets. And instead of changing the worlds entirely between the sets as well, we decided to keep the story continuous and just have it flow from one location to another and just keep the whole thing kind of cohesive across the board. And this was all done so that that sense of continuity would just show from track to track and from scene to scene, even though they're all for different tracks, but it was all supposed to come together as one big story. And so the absence of the artist becomes the concept, and the emotion that carries the whole story becomes the anchor that ties everything all together. Now the cars weren't just props, they were more of narrative devices. We rented out 3 vintage cars from this rental location in New York, and they were an Oldsmobile F85, a Chrysler Newport or New Yorker, I'm not really sure which one it is specifically, and the last one was a Chevrolet Monte Carlo. The F85 had a nostalgic, grounded energy, and it felt very reflective. The tone of that performance leaned inward, which was more contained and more intimate. The Chrysler felt transitional. It acted as a bridge between emotional states, and its presence really helped the story move forward. And then the Monte Carlo had presence, it had a wider stance and more attitude, and that performance had tension, so visually the car really amplified that weight. As the day progressed, the narrative progressed as well. It was all new cars, new performers, and slight shifts in the emotional tone, but it was all still one continuous story. Just to make this project happen, we had to keep rescheduling because the forecast kept showing that it was going to rain, and we finally settled on this one day where it was not supposed to rain, but the rain just kind of showed up out of nowhere, and right at the start of the day too. Instead of fighting it, we decided to embrace it because we didn't really have much of a choice. But it wasn't that much of a bad thing because the wet pavement on the floor gave us some nice looking reflections. The finish on the F85 caught highlights differently, which was also cool, and the headlights bloomed in a way that felt cinematic without extra effort. The main challenge was really control and protecting the gear. Thankfully, it only lasted for a little bit and only while we were at the first location, so it didn't really affect us that much as the day progressed. Shooting 3 different visualizers in one day requires a high amount of precision, and when you factor in the weather to that, your margin for error definitely has to shrink. My role on this project was grip and BTS, which meant that I was both helping shape the image and I was documenting the process. Most of the scenes were lit using the Aperture Storm 1200X, which was powered by a generator, along with a few modifiers and reflectors here and there just to help put it all together. We had to keep it low-key and compact because we were moving from location to location, and also because of the weather. From a grip standpoint, it was all about controlling the spill of light and flagging reflections, stabilizing setups around the vehicles, and keeping everything safe and efficient in wet conditions. In certain setups as well, I also kind of stepped in as a dolly operator. Movements on the dolly were subtle but intentional. It was more about slow pushes and small adjustments that made performances feel immersive instead of static. And when you're working around cars, you can't have the movement feeling accidental. It has to feel like it's motivated and like the camera is breathing with the performer. Operating the dolly while also thinking about grip responsibilities helps you to stay focused and aware of space, timing, and continuity. The setups really had to be efficient because, again, we were moving from location to location, so we needed it to be as much of a minimal footprint as possible because we wanted to have fast breakdown times and clean resets when we needed to switch over. Now, the biggest risk with shooting 3 different visualizers in one day is that there's this sense of disconnection that comes with it. So we had to build the continuity around the visual language. That essentially entailed similar framing structures, consistent camera height, repeated motifs in terms of things like hands on steering wheels, door opens and closes, control movements across all 3 performances essentially. Even though the cars were different, the cinematic grammar stayed the same, and that's really what made it feel like one flowing story instead of 3 unrelated pieces. Shooting 3 visualizers in one day isn't about moving fast, it's about moving intentionally. There's a couple of things to keep in mind when working on projects like this. One of them is to really prioritize the spine of your story. For us, that spine was the cars, the performances, and even the rain-soaked atmosphere. Every angle, every setup, and every lighting adjustment existed to serve just that. If it didn't, it had to be cut. Knowing what matters most keeps the visuals coherent and the day efficient. It's also very important to be able to adapt to shifting conditions, and for us those were things like the rain, the shifting light because we were shooting outside in daytime, transitioning into nighttime as well, slippery roads, protecting the gear from the weather, all kinds of things really. Another takeaway is really that efficiency is planned, but it should never be rushed. With 3 different tracks and 3 cars, as well as multiple locations, we had to make every setup count. Fast is meaningless if the shot doesn't serve the story. Moving efficiently means making smart and deliberate choices, and also knowing when the frame is ready, not just moving quickly to tick boxes. But at the end of the day, the chaos wasn't that much of a hurdle, and it was the energy that really made the project stay alive. This was a really fun project to work on, and I want to give a big shout out to my friend CEOJAY, as well as the artist Scribbles Who for coming up with such a fascinating concept really. And also to the rest of the crew who really made this whole project come alive and make the whole thing come together. And I also want this to be a reminder that sometimes those unexpected things that you can't really control, whether it's the weather or logistics and such, those are really the things that tend to give projects like this character. And when it happens, it's out of your control, so there's really not much that you can do, but you have to be able to adapt, and you need to learn how to solve problems on set like this too, because that's essentially what's going to make or break your project. So that's a really important skill to have. Anyways, thanks for watching, and you can let me know in the comments below which one of the scenes was your favorite one from all the different cars that we used and all the different locations and shots that we were able to create. And I'm going to try to make a couple more of these in the future too, so if that's something that you're interested in, then like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll see you in the next one. Later.